BC finishes what it has to do. We know that there's a judicial recount that's going to be conducted in Surrey Guildford. But he also talked beyond the business and the practicalities of the legislature to talk about bridging that gap, the urban-rural gap, and the political divide with Conservative leader John Rustad, who's about to speak now. Let's go live.
Kind of like, what do we do now? But no, in all seriousness, I'm actually just thought I'd start off just talking a little bit about the campaign. You know, I think for us as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, it was, you know, quite a major accomplishment. A year and a half ago, we had, what, 2% in the polls and no MLAs. And so then I joined the party in February of 2023. We went through, Bruce Bamman joined us in September of 2023, giving us official party status. And from there, we continued to grow support across the province, culminating now in the largest number of Conservatives elected in British Columbia's history. Certainly the first time that there has been a Conservative elected in the legislature since 1978. Some of the other accomplishments we did as the Conservative Party is we actually have the first Black woman who has been elected since 1972. We have 41% of our MLAs elected are women. About 22% or so of our MLAs are ethnic minorities. It's quite an accomplishment for our party, and I'm very proud of the team that has been elected and put together. I think, quite frankly, when you look at what's across the province too, and the desire for change in the province, I think the voters have spoke very loudly in terms of what their expectations are for this government, as well as for us as opposition. Our job now going forward, clearly, I mean, there's still some questions to be answered in terms of the judicial reviews, but our job going forward in opposition is to make sure that we fight for the values and fight for the things that the Conservative Party stands for. Those things that we've been fought for the last year and a half, those things that we fought for during the election, those are the things that we are going to be pushing for in the legislature to try to move forward. Should the NDP decide they want to push forward any part of their agenda that relates to what we're trying to achieve, they'll find us as a partner. If they're going to continue on with their pace, with the destruction that they have wreaked upon this province with their previous 7 years, they'll find us vehemently opposed in terms of how we will function within the legislature. In particular, when I think about our resource sector, there is a lot that needs to be done there, especially for forestry. Forestry right now is on its knees. It has been systematically attacked by this NDP government. We have a deadline of next August where the duties are anticipated to increase by about 40%, which would shut down virtually all of the forest sector in this province if that carries forward and we're not in a situation where the prices are better. This government needs to understand that our resource sector is a critical component of what we need to achieve in this province, supporting families, supporting jobs, supporting communities, and quite frankly, supporting the revenues that are needed in British Columbia. We'll also be making sure that we push David Eby very hard on things like involuntary compassionate treatment. It's a big piece for us that we pushed in the campaign. David Eby flopped on that issue. We're going to make sure we hold him to that, and we make sure we get that in place. Our streets need to be cleaned up. We need to be changing what's happening on our streets with drugs. And so that's a big push that we will have with David Eby in terms of his government and holding him accountable. We're also going to hold him to his word in terms of getting rid of the consumer carbon tax. We're going to be pushing to get rid of the entire carbon tax, but that's something that he had promised to do, and we have full expectations that he will do that. We will push and try to figure out how we can leverage that to get rid of the entire carbon tax in British Columbia. But it's an important piece of affordability that's needed in British Columbia. There's many other promises that David Eby has made throughout the campaign, and as well as the things that have been promised in the past. And I look forward to the opportunity in the legislature to hold him to account for all of these promises and make sure that he's living up to the things that he has said he would do for the people in this province. So with that, I very much look forward to our caucus will be sworn in on the night of November 12th. We'll have an opportunity then to have a little bit of a ceremony associated with that. And we look forward to the work that may come as early as this fall if they call back the legislature, or certainly if not, then by next spring. So I'm happy to take any questions anybody might have.
We're going to one question, one follow-up. Let's go ahead.
Well, thanks. Election night, John, you said that if the NDP came back in a minority, you'd bring them down at the first opportunity. They've got a scant majority now, but that general kind of attitude, does that still prevail, or is there a bit of room for cooperation here?
So the only thing that we would be doing in terms of looking at supporting David Eby and his government is if they're moving forward an agenda that matches with the things that we want to accomplish for the people in British Columbia. We will always put the people of British Columbia first, as we did throughout the entire campaign. The average everyday working person in this province, if there are things that are moved forward that will improve those lives for those people, we would be looking at supporting it. But if he's going to carry forward with the destructive policies that he has, then yes, we're going to look at every opportunity possible to bring him down as soon as possible.
And I guess the Premier said they're going to recall the legislature in the next few weeks, very brief sitting. The first face-off that you will have, I guess they have to, we need a speaker. Would you nominate someone for a speaker, or do you have any thoughts on that?
So I do know that the NDP have been calling around our members, asking and looking for somebody to become a speaker for them. It's not something that certainly I'm considering supporting at this stage. If David Eby wanted to call me and say that he wants to move forward with significant parts of our agenda, maybe there's something that we could be talking about. But at this stage, you know, I would not be looking at offering one of our members to be speaker to support the agenda that he ran on.
Justine?
Hi, John.
Hi.
What are your thoughts then on the grocery rebate? Would you support that?
The grocery rebate?
This is the $1,000 per household that David Eby offered up as part of their platform. It certainly would help people that are struggling with affordability right now. Would you support that? Would you go for it?
So as I said, as a Conservative Party, anything that will help the average everyday hardworking person in this province is something that we would certainly look at supporting. Obviously, that's a discussion that we'll have to have in caucus, depending on whether that's a piece of legislation that David Eby brings forward this fall.
And speaking of caucus, have you met with your caucus formally, and what have you said to them, or what are you planning to say about free votes?
So I have met with them. We had our first caucus meeting last week, and certainly we'll have an opportunity to be talking again in the future. But as I've said all the way through this campaign, I'm expecting our MLAs to do the job of representing their riding, to make sure they speak on behalf of their riding. And so from that perspective, there will be opportunities for them to be able to voice their perspective in the legislature.
Richard?
There are still some supporters of yours out on social media questioning the results of this election, saying that Elections BC did not handle this well, describe this as rigged. What message do you send to your supporters who are spreading this information on social media?
Well, we put out a statement last night with regards to this election and the Election BC process. We accept the results of Election BC. We want to thank the people in Election BC. I know the people working there worked hard to try to achieve the counting and the process that needed to be done. So I want to thank them for that. But as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, we accept these results and we look forward to the work that we have in front of us.
But what do you say to people who continue to spread this information through social media? Like, what would you say directly to that?
People have the right to say what they're going to say. From a Conservative Party perspective, from my perspective, we accept the results that have been presented to us from Elections BC. Certainly not the results that I want to see. We were optimistic and hopeful that we would have an opportunity to be able to bring about the significant change that we are looking for from our throughout our platform, throughout the mandate. But unfortunately, we fell just short of being able to do that.
Go ahead.
John, I'm wondering, have you had any conversations with the Green senators when I was critical of some of your candidates last week? I'm wondering, the dynamics have shifted a bit with yesterday's results, but have you had any discussions about a partnership with them at all?
No, so I had just one conversation with Sonia last week. Talked about what we could potentially be doing and what we could potentially work on together. Of course, we said that that would be pending the results, but I have not had an opportunity to talk to her since the results have been done.
By way of follow-up, you indicated, if I understood you correctly, you would not encourage any of your candidates to accept an offer to be Speaker of the House, but you know that someone doesn't have been contacted. Are you worried that you might lose an MLA to either crossing the floor or being lured to become the Speaker of the House?
I'm not too worried. I mean, from the caucus meeting we had, people are pretty upbeat and optimistic about the work. They are very proud of getting elected, being part of the Conservative movement that has been created in this province. I mean, it has been, you know, really since the 1930s, since there was any sizable amount of Conservative caucus in the legislature. And so they're part of making that history in British Columbia, and I think they're very proud of it, and certainly I'm proud of all of them.
Alec?
Circling back to free votes, you said that, you know, you've long promised that candidates and MLAs would be beholden to their riding before the party. Just wondering if that will carry on into the legislature, and how much leash will MLAs have when it comes to expressing their free vote in the legislature?
Well, certainly there's, I mean, there's standards and values that we have as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, but one of those is that people's #1 priority will be to represent their riding. And so we'll uphold those standards.
Yeah, by way of follow-up, in terms of, you know, shared policies, you said that you'd work with the NDP if there's something that they bring forward that you believe is also needed. What are some of those ideas in terms of public safety, affordability? Those are things that David Eby has mentioned. Do you see room to work with the NDP on some of those priorities?
Well, it's interesting that David Eby's talked about public safety, given that has certainly not been a priority of his government with the runaway crime that we have seen in British Columbia. If he is interested in pushing the federal government for things like guaranteed minimum sentencing and bail reform, those are things that I'd be supporting to do. If he wanted to bring additional judges into the system and create an avenue for being able to take these prolific offenders off the street and get them through the criminal system as fast as possible, that's certainly something I would be supporting should they move forward with doing this type of an approach. When it comes to doing anything that is going to help the average everyday person in this province, like getting rid of the carbon tax, those are sort of things that I would be more than interested in supporting.
Dirk?
Hi. Since the election, I'm wondering what your mood is. Are you still looking for blood, or are you looking to maybe be a bit of a collaborator?
I can say that, like I say, coming out of the election, I'm very excited about what we've achieved. I'm very excited about who we are as the Conservative Party in British Columbia. I mean, we have done something that nobody has done in Canadian history in such a short period of time. And so I'm very proud of that, and very proud of the work that I know that we are going to have in front of us. So I come out of this election disappointed that we didn't form government, but optimistic in terms of the work that we have to do, and very much actually looking forward to getting at it and holding this government to account.
Right. And I'm just thinking, how can you actually even be talking to the Greens, or you guys are so opposite? They want the carbon tax. You don't want the carbon tax. You want LNG or resource things to continue. They say don't do it anymore. How can you even be talking to them?
Well, you know, there's always places where people from different perspectives have an opportunity to find common ground. And so that's the sort of thing that we would look for. And after all, that was a big part of who I was when I was kicked out of the BC Liberal Party. I kept working on what we wanted to achieve, building up that coalition within this province, inviting people to come over and join and be part of it. We kept moving people over, adjusting as we went through, and those values that we brought forward with the election. And so there is some room in terms of some of the things that I think they would like that we could potentially work together on. Obviously, there's many things that we are in disagreement with as well.
Margaret?
Yeah, you referred to the NDP as having some disruptive policies. Would you try and turn back things like short-term rental and the SOGI program, or are you just sort of waiting for them to set a direction and then oppose what you don't like as they go along?
I think what you'll see from the Conservative Party is we will likely be bringing forward some private member bills, you know, pushing forward some of the things that we think need to be happening in British Columbia, and looking for those opportunities to push the government in the direction that we've been campaigning on and wanting to see.
And specifically on SOGI, are you going to be pushing for parental involvement more than as presently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Parents should know what's going on in our schools. Parents should have a right. It's their right to be able to raise their children. It's their right to know what's happening with their children in education. I think that's a very important piece of how our society operates.
Oh my God.
And so To what extent do you see yourself working with the NDP and the Greens, finding any commonality on issues like housing and healthcare? Are there any things from their platforms on those issues that you connect with or see a path forward on?
I mean, if I will be pushing the NDP, particularly when it comes to housing, on actually getting the permitting process cleaned up so that we can see projects move forward. There are tens of thousands of housing starts in this province that are stalled out, that are not moving forward because it's taken too long, it's too costly. There are issues in terms of the building code that have just added cost. So my hope is that through this election, maybe Dave Eby heard some of the concerns that the public has, and we can find a way to be able to move forward those parts of the agenda that will actually help to get housing built in the province of British Columbia.
Your intention was to form government. You've fallen short of that. What do you feel stood in the way of forming government this time?
Well, I think there's an old saying in politics that you don't lose elections, you run out of time. And the unfortunate part is that we needed perhaps some more time to be able to connect, particularly with those people in the province that may not have heard the messaging and what we were trying to achieve in this province. So we'll be doing some analysis and work on that and looking at what sort of issues were a barrier for people that did not vote for us in light of the fact that there could be an election at any time going forward.
Mary, Jeff?
Hi, just a quick question. I'm just wondering, during the campaign, it was particularly divisive. I mean, there was name calling going on. Do you think that that's conducive to a working environment? Because everyone is dealing with such a tight margin here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the way through the campaign, David Eby, quite frankly, was a habitual liar about who we are, about what we did, about our platform. Every day of the campaign, he was out saying these things. And I'm not going to say, oh, it's okay. That's who he is. That's his personality. I'll certainly be looking to call him out in the legislature as we move forward. However, elections are elections. This election's behind us. And our job as the Conservative Party is to fight as hard as we can for the average everyday person in this province to try to improve their lives. And we'll be doing that whether it's in opposition to government or trying to force government's hand to be able to make sure that things get done to help people.
And just to follow up, just because there is such a slim margin, would you see an opportunity and take it perhaps as quickly as possible to take down the government?
If David Eby moves forward with the policies and approaches that he has done in British Columbia, then yeah, we're going to be looking at bringing it down as quickly as possible. When you look at what's happened in our society and the fact that after 7 years, you can't point to anything that is better in this province. If he's going to carry on with that path, I would have no choice but to oppose and make an attempt to bring it down, bring it to an end.
Hi, John. Your party's platform and some of your candidates have drawn some pretty strong condemnation from First Nations leaders, both for the proposal on economic reconciliation as well as some comments that your candidates have made. How do you see working with the First Nations community, especially with issues that come up in the natural resource sector? You talked about forestry. Do you think you have some work to do there in order to rebuild relationships after this campaign?
So I think you're referring to a comment that our candidate in the Malhat made. I find her comments that she made quite offensive. Certainly they're not part of who I am or who we are as a party. And I can tell you that she will not be a candidate for this party going forward should there be a snap election. Having said that, obviously our working with First Nations is a huge priority. You cannot achieve anything, whether it's in the resource sector or otherwise in this province, unless you find a way to be able to work with First Nations and to resolve particularly the issue of things like title. But what I find most curious is David Eby has not been held account to what he has done with First Nations. For example, we have seen the life expectancy of First Nations drop by 6 years under David Eby's government. And yet no outrage over that. I find that outrageous, that is what has happened in such a short period of time. The fact that 20% of the people who have died from an overdose have been Indigenous, and no outrage over that. Alia Warbus called it a genocide on her people. And clearly, when you look at those statistics, that is shocking. And so I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done working with First Nations to resolve some of these issues. And I'm very surprised, actually, that First Nation leadership themselves have not called out David Eby for those failures.
One follow-up, way back in 2018, you you told me that you found opposition frustrating, that you hoped not to be in it for very long, and that you really, weren't particularly happy being in an opposition role. I'm wondering if you feel differently now that you're leaving the official opposition, and how you look at what lies ahead in the legislature.
Absolutely agree with my comments before. Being in opposition is extremely frustrating, because when you see what a government does, and particularly I'll use the forest sector example again, when you see people losing their jobs, when you see mills closing down, when you see the damage to families and communities, and know that all you can do is point a finger and complain about it, that is frustrating. I'd much rather be in a situation where we can actually do the work that's necessary to support those jobs, support those families and communities.
Hey, John. So, you mentioned some of the comments that were revealed this weekend from the candidate for Malhat. Have you spoken to some of the MLA elects about the messaging going forward, or is there anything that you're going to do to try to, prevent those sort of comments from being made in the future?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, people can say what they want to say. My perspective, though, is, as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, we have values and we have standards that we need to uphold for the people in this province and for who we represent. We also need to make sure that we recognize that we are a big team. And so, for example, I talked very closely with Alia Warbus about those comments and about the sort of process and what had gone on. I know that Alia, as well as Chris Sankey, have talked to Marina about the inappropriateness of those comments as well.
And you've said over the past week or so a couple times about wanting to break down the government at the first opportunity. Do you think the people of BC have the appetite for another election right now?
I don't believe they do, no. I don't believe they want to go to another election right away. Clearly, we have had an election. Elections are very divisive, they're very expensive, they're very problematic. However, when I look at the damage that has been done by David Eby, if he's going to carry on with that path, then I would have no choice.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, you talked earlier about your MLAs being free to speak their minds, but I just wanted to get clarity on how far that extends. Will Conservative votes be whipped, or will they be free to vote their conscience on everything?
There may be some issues that we do whip. However, I would expect that there will be other issues where people will be free to be able to vote their conscience. But those will be issues that we'll make sure that we talk about in our caucus amongst the MLAs that are elected, to make sure that people have a full understanding and where everything's at, and try to resolve any sort of issues that we might have.
And just looking back on the campaign, at this point, any regrets on how it was conducted, the tone, or anything?
History always is 20/20 vision. You always can look back and think, coulda, woulda, shouldas. But at the end of the day, for coming from the party that had no money, that had no team, that had no representatives, and in a year and a half building it up to the place where we just fell short of forming government, I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to accomplish.
From Dan Burton, Vancouver for CBC. Where'd you get the data that life expectancy for First Nations in BC has dropped?
So we'll get that to you if you'd like. That was a piece of data that I happened to notice that came out. I think it was from the period of 2017 through to 2021 or 2022. I can't remember exactly where it is, but I read the report, so I'm sure we can find that for you.
Last questions?
I got one more, if you don't mind. Now that we're clear on what's happening, what's your assessment of the BC United capitulation surrender? How did that work out for you?
Well, I think Kevin Falcon recognized that we needed to take the steps necessary to try to make sure we brought an end to what David Eby has done in this province and the damage of the NDP. And so that's why he suspended the campaign, and that's why he supported us. That message clearly didn't get through to everybody that was part of their group. There was a lot of people that were dissatisfied and wanted to carry on with the fight. It's unfortunate. It would have been great if that could have happened 3 months earlier. That would have given us time to be able to do a bunch of things. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But like I say, you can go back and you can look at how things are done and wish it could have been done differently. But I'm very proud of, like I say, of the team that we put together and what we've accomplished in such a short period of time.
That'll be all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
So the new rule is one question, one fall-off, and one less lane.
Well, actually, you know what? If Les had another question, I would be happy to take a second follow-up. Anyway, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, John.
We know the late Mi'kmaq director, Jeff Barnaby, is certainly well known. I just like to